hi everyone. Welcome to our LinkedIn live series, ADHD in the Workplace. I created this space recognizing that living with ADHD can present challenges in the world of work. And so I hope that through this series, we can generate ideas to support adults with ADHD to utilize their strengths in their workplace. So I'm your host, Samantha Hugh, the director of ADHD Girls, a company with a social mission to empower girls and women with ADHD to thrive in their lives through effective advocacy, education, and specialist insights. So we have a very special guest today on our LinkedIn Live, and she is someone from the same part of the world where I came from. So there's a lot of familiarity and solidarity and comfort. A journey companion, someone with a parallel mission as myself in empowering ADHDers. Please welcome Moonlake Lee, founder of Unlocking ADHD and Singapore's 40 over 40 Inspiring Women of 2021. So Moonlake has had a varied career. Much like myself, she is a multi-hyphenate. She has been a lawyer, a healthcare marketer, investor, mentor, runner, and community builder. At the age of 50, she was diagnosed with ADHD following her own daughter's diagnosis. And she's an inspiring woman who leads a community of 50 volunteers to power the mission of a very impactful organization called Unlocking ADHD in Singapore. So given Moonlake's wealth of experience in leading numerous organizations, today we'll be discussing this topic. How do you thrive in your career as an individual with ADHD?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for having me on the show, and it's great to see you again. So I guess you were asking me about, how do you thrive, right, in an organization with
So
ADHD?
I'm interested in given so much experience that you have in leading organizations, and like creating strategies that grow a team. I wondered, what do you think, are the qualities that help you thrive as an ADHD-er?
Well, I think, there are a couple of them. One of the superpowers that most ADHDers have actually is hyperfocus. And I think that we need to utilize that more strategically, especially when it comes to the workplace, because with the hyperfocus, we can really go deep into something, especially when it's something interesting to us. And when we do that, we actually become specialists in that field, and that not just gives us the recognition, but also the confidence. That's one, and that's helped me a lot. The other thing is actually persistence. If the first try it doesn't go through, I'll keep on trying different angles, different ways. And I think that's sort of related to resilience, because for people with ADHD, we've had so many hiccups along the way in life, ups and downs. And I think that sort of makes us strong as well. So when you combine that resilience along with the persistence, then, at the place where everyone sort of gives up, and if you keep on going, you will get there. So that's the second one. One of the things I really am very pleased that I think it's right from my mom, is energy. Okay, so I tend to be the more hyperactive presentation of ADHD. And I think that really helps too, because with that energy and with the hyperfocus together, it can be a pretty powerful combination, because you can do a lot more than what other people can do. But of course, there's a little bit of a danger that you tend to go like a speeding train without a brake. So, I have to learn how to pace myself too on that. But that's been pretty helpful. And of course, there's the creativity as well. I always used to think that creativity was to do with painting or music or dancing, but actually creativity can be in terms of problem solving. And I think that's probably one of the areas where I am more creative in. So I think that's been helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so interested in your experience because many ADHDers really struggle to follow instructions or do the things that they don't find interesting or important to them, because we are motivated by an interest-based nervous system rather than an importance-based nervous system. So we tend to do really well when it's something that we are really interested in, we believe in, and we're passionate about. So in your experience as someone who is a CEO and a director, and so used to leading a team, isn't that the perfect job for you?
You might say so. I mean, I did struggle with it in the early part of my career. I started off being a lawyer, and of all things, being a tax lawyer. Okay, now you're laughing, right? So you can imagine what I'm going to say next. I think that I think one really has to know how you're wired, and where your strengths are. And, when I was younger, I was still struggling to figure out who I was and what I was good at. And, one thing that a lot of ADHDers never lack actually is effort. A lot of us actually work very hard, a lot harder than most people, just to try and keep up. So definitely hard work wasn't an issue, but again, the wiring didn't really work well, right? As a tax lawyer, I had to be very detail oriented. There was a lot of time, spent doing research, drafting and writing contracts and all that. So, for someone whom I just mentioned, I was hyperactive. It's a little bit like a square peg in a round hole. So, once I sort of switched out into an area that was more aligned with my wiring, then that's when I began to do better and better. And I actually did the best when I was in a position where I could have more autonomy, where I could put my creativity to good use, and where, no 2 days were the same. There was a lot of interaction, meeting people, going around, doing different projects. So that, I think, brought out the strengths that I had inside. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely relate to that and resonate to that, because after I moved away from cancer research, I went into healthcare writing, and the first place I tried was regulatory medical writing, which is very tight and there's no place to maneuver. And I remember looking at the gray office carpet and falling asleep, and trying to eat as much snacks as possible to keep me awake. But really, I was always craving human interaction and connection. And, just wanted to do something with my hands and my body and just want to move, right? But yeah, it's like too much constraint and no room to maneuver is not, good for people like us, who have this need to just be out there, right? to connect and to do things that are impactful, and you can see the result as well.
Exactly. And I think the part of it is actually knowing, yourself better. And, as you mentioned earlier, I was diagnosed late, right? I was diagnosed at the age of 50. So at the age of 50, a good part of people's career, I mean, they're like, I won't say it's over, because, we're living longer now, but, at 50, you're probably mid-career for most people. So you can imagine, like, the first part of my career, I was just moving around trying to figure out, what I was good at, and what I could do. And I think that's not an untypical pattern for people with ADHD. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But then, like you say, the world is getting younger, and like the concept of ageism, it isn't really that relevant anymore. Like, I think most people would think like by the age of 40, you're going to be like so old. But I'm 40 now, but I don't feel so old. And I get confused when people say, but you look so young, you act so young, you talk so young. And yeah, so the society's perception of how we should be isn't really relevant these days. And when I look at how many more years, are left in my career, I don't feel so worried, because I think with ADHD, we tend to look at like the big picture, but if we could just break down into 1 year at a time, maybe, and maybe even 1 month at a time, then that makes us feel a lot better about things.
I mean, just to give an example, right? I'm sure most people with ADHD are familiar with Dr. Edward Hallowell, Ned Hallowell.
Yeah.
He's like 73 right now, right?
Yeah.
And he's very energetic. And you know what? He's a really cool person. I think the last time I checked, which is about a month or two ago, he had like 100,000 followers on TikTok.
Yeah.
He's on TikTok. He's pretty big on TikTok. 73-year-old guy, right?
Yeah.
So there really aren't many boundaries, really.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Exactly. He's truly inspiring. And yeah, you're completely right. He's very inspirational, and he's ball of energy, and he has ADHD, a psychiatrist who's helping people with ADHD. So
Absolutely.
can you tell me a bit more about Unlocking ADHD and what you and your team do, what your mission is, and what your vision is for the future?
Well, Unlocking ADHD actually is about 6 months old. We just formally launched on October 1st because of ADHD Awareness Month. The mission for Unlocking ADHD is to empower ADHDers and their families to live life to the fullest. We want to help ADHDers unlock their hidden potential and help them identify their strengths. And we're hoping to do this in 4 different ways. The first way is awareness, because that's always the foundation, is to be more aware of what it is and whether they have it. and go for a diagnosis if they suspect that they might have it. But beyond that awareness is accessibility, to access the right professionals that are familiar with ADHD, that are able to help them manage the condition, to be able to access resources, to access community support, to help them grow. And then the other two ways that we're trying to do this is through really celebrating achievement, because for too long there's been a focus on leveling the playing field, which is fair. We should, with accommodations, but we also should look at how can you maximize the potential, because many ADHDers are so talented, they're creative, they're smart, but we don't hear as many stories, and we should hear more, because these inspire, and this also changes the perception that people have of ADHD and removes the stigma. Okay, and then the last A, the pillar that we have, is advocacy, because again, there's a lot of misconception and stigma about the condition. We just want to just do more to let society at large know that, take a second look, support us, because give us a chance, we can change the world.
Sure, and this is such an amazing mission, and also very much needed, especially in Asia. And I believe that Unlocking ADHD is a pioneer organization in this field, and there's so much more work to be done, because we know that ADHD doesn't just affect Western counterparts. We have people of all shapes and sizes and culture,
Yes.
and races with
Yeah,
ADHD.
absolutely. And the reason why I started it, right? I always tell people is two words. The first word is hope. We want to give hope to the community. And it's from personal experience. As I mentioned, I have ADHD. My daughter has ADHD. And within a span of less than 3 years, right, she went from a girl who didn't have much hope for the future. She was pretty much failing 5 out of 8 subjects in school and not knowing what she wants to be. 3 years later, she managed to do well in the A levels, and she's just started dental school in the UK. So that's a huge transformation in 3 years. And that's possible because, again, she was diagnosed. So that actually was a turning point in her life, and also having the right support around her. And I believe that she's not unique. There are other people out there like that, and we do want to reach them. So that's the first part, the hope. The second part why we started is because there really is a gap in information. In Singapore, if you were to Google ADHD in Singapore, you would see a lot of private clinic websites and the occasional government one-pager. But if someone suspects they have ADHD or they were just diagnosed, there really isn't much information that they could find online on what are the next steps, or how to get connected to a community, or what is daily living like. So with Unlocking ADHD, we wanted to do something about this. So if you go to our website, you can see that there's a section on understanding ADHD and also living with ADHD and how it affects families, youth, and adults, and also connections to our support groups. What's so special about us, actually, and I was just reflecting about it last night, is that not only have we grown so much in 6 months since we started, but we are really a great example of ADHD strengths. 40% of my volunteers have ADHD or suspected ADHD. And the fact that we can power up something so fast, have the most comprehensive website on ADHD in Singapore and probably the region, and we did it in 6 to 7 weeks, right? It's community, ground up driven, again, ADHD powered. We're doing it from the inside out. I think that's really empowering, because for too long, right, people with ADHD think that they really are losing control of their lives. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. You're born with it. It's a biological thing. So there's a sense of disempowerment, but we all know that even though we can't change our situation, we can change how we respond to things. And when we change our attitude and the way we respond, we can actually change our outcome, just like in my daughter's case. So
Yeah.
what we are going to do is restore that sense of empowerment, right? Take ownership. And I have to say, one of the unexpected blessings, of Unlocking ADHD really has been the volunteers that I've been working with. First of all, I've been so blessed. They've been just amazing people. But secondly, in their lives, I can see that those who actually were willing to put out more time, more effort, into this to build it up, those are the ones that actually benefited the most. They told me that they wake up every day with a sense of purpose. And because of that sense of purpose, in fact, one of my volunteers told me that she was recently discharged by her psychologist because the psychologist felt that she didn't need his help anymore. She had found a supportive community. She had grown in confidence. And also, I love these kind of stories because, it can happen to anyone, right? So just, having this common vision, right? This common goal. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's exciting, very exciting.
Yeah, and also with people who live with ADHD, we have to do something that we are emotionally attached to, and something
Absolutely.
that, yeah, because we function via the emotional brain a lot of the time, and so something that is so closely, reflected in their own lives, is something that most people feel so much reward, in doing it. So I can see why
Absolutely.
volunteers. Yeah. I want to touch on your personal experience. You mentioned your daughter's journey, and how like she was able to be transformed with a diagnosis. So from someone who was failing exams to someone who's now accepted to a competitive field of dentistry in the UK. So what help did you give her, after her diagnosis, that allows her to say turn her life around?
I think the most important, actually, I mean, there's so many aspects of this. Um, Definitely key would be to get a good team, and in our case, we had a very good developmental behavioral pediatrician. I had never even heard of that term before, until last year. But she was amazing. She was playing detective and helping us strategize the next move. And, she connected me with an executive function coach, which, again, I also wasn't familiar with that before. But now I'm a huge believer in that. In fact, that's something that Unlocking ADHD is trying to do the next couple of months. Just to have someone there to support, for all the times that you have trouble executing, right? But beyond that, I think what really helped is our relationship. A lot of times when you're dealing with families with ADHD, there's tension in the family, inevitably. I mean, we already have it whether you have ADHD or not, right? It's just part of, the
Yeah.
growing years, right? But with ADHD and all the different things that you have to manage and scaffold, there's more challenge. So if the relationship and the communication is strong in the family, then that is half the battle won.
Mhm.
There were times that we had to make very tough decisions. And I know that my daughter wasn't happy because she did tell me later on she resented it. But because of our relationship, and she knew that trust that she had, that, I wouldn't do something to harm her, right? Even though it sounded crazy, she went along with it. And because she worked with me, it made things so much easier to implement.
Mhm.
So I think that's important, the relationship.
Mhm. Yeah. So to summarize, I mean, was she ever on medication?
Yes, she has been on medication since she was diagnosed. She was diagnosed at age 15.
Mhm.
I know that it's sort of like a hot button topic, in the community. I know. But the way I see it is to just see it as one of the tools. It's not the only one, and it should not be the only one because you still need to learn about behavior management. So that should not be the only tool. However, it is an important one. And scientifically, there's a lot of evidence base that 70-80% of the people that, are on medication actually found it more effective and efficient. And, medication helps you access learning, especially for children. So, and we just actually invited Dr. Dan Shapiro. He's a very well-known behavioral developmental pediatrician from the US to open our Unlocking ADHD launch with a talk on, to medicate or not medicate your child. And absolutely fantastic points that he made. A lot of things that people may not instinctively think about. Things like how, having medication not just helps you access your learning, but also, handles a lot of the things in the home because there's a lot of tension in the house. And why use it as the last resort kind of thing, right? When you put a last resort, you're actually putting your home under stress. The parents will point fingers at each other, then the relationship with the kid is not so good. So there's other things that are not obvious to one that actually can get affected. So I would say just keep an open mind, explore it. You can still do a trial. You don't have to like commit, but open the mind to that as well. Yeah, and that helps her for sure.
Yeah. So, like with people who live with ADHD, typically children in education, um, having all these strategies in place, to help them, sort of bring out their potential, so because the potential is there, and a lot of children with ADHD are actually really intelligent, but
Yep.
it is the, inability to focus, or to put themselves into the education system, which a lot of the time isn't really friendly to a neurodivergent brain. So would you say that the strategies that you had in place, the behavioral management, the psychoeducation, executive function coaching, and medication all helped in helping her to make the career choice that she has chosen now?
Well, well, I think for her though, it wasn't so much us helping her to make a career choice because she made it, before we had all this help. It's just that we help her achieve it, but it still had to come from her.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that did help, in the run up to the university applications was she had to do a career profiling test. It's called the Morrisby. Actually, it's based in UK, so you may or may not be familiar with that. But that was helpful. It confirmed for her that that was the most appropriate for her aptitude and her interests. Um, and we supported her all we could in terms of giving her exposure or opportunities to find out more about that field, or practice, like observing people and playing with her hands, right? Like making things. So those are the ways we supported. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great, and I think what you did was you provided the scaffolding and the
Yeah.
environment that facilitated her growth, so she could reach there, and like I would say that she was really fortunate to have, discovered her diagnosis, and also to have some supportive parents, that help her get there. And not all of us have that privilege. So, it's great that your daughter had that, and, she found her way. And while an ADHD-er is in their career, what sort of help can they, do they need in order to harness their strengths? Because it doesn't stop there. You get into the career path and then you're in career now. So in your experience, what do you think they need in order to, support them in the workplace?
Well, I guess the first assumption is that they know that they have ADHD already, right? So, if they do, then if, for example, medication has been indicated, then they should at least try to be consistent with that. Okay. So, sort of like be consistent for that part. Secondly, what I've found that works very well for me and for a lot of people is this thing called the Clifton Strength Finder.
Mm.
I came across it a couple of years ago, and, it identifies your 34 strengths. And the strengths sort of fall into four main groups. The first group is executing, that's influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And knowing where one's top strengths fall into actually gives one the awareness, the self-awareness of taking on projects that would fit within that strength. And I'm sure that many people know that when you are in your zone, right, basically, like you can work forever, and you're really going to be productive. You're on a high, right? And I think that's tapping our dopamine and all the good stuff about us, our energy, our hyper focus. So finding your strengths helps you access and release that into your career. And I know that for me, from that time onwards, whatever project I wanted to do, I tried to see whether it was consistent with my strengths. But the good thing is those strengths, they're not carved in stone. They do change based on your circumstances. And that you could also decide that, hey, there are some strengths that you wish were stronger relatively, to the current. You can also work on them. And that's what I found. Like I recently did my strength finder again, after 3 years of not doing it, and my strengths shifted. Okay, so now three of my top five are actually in influencing.
Oh.
So, so that's interesting, right? But if you think about it, it's not surprising, because the last couple of months, right, what have I been working very hard on? It's trying to
Advocacy.
communicate and influence, right? So basically, it's almost like going to the gym and doing a workout, right? I'm building muscle in these areas.
Yeah.
So that's the good news. The Strength Finder shows you what you have now. It's almost like a balance sheet, right? At this point in time, that's what you have, which is great. Know yourself. But beyond that, you can actually work on things that you want to see more of. Just like you go to the gym and do a workout, right? And build those muscles. So
Yeah.
that helps in planning. Yeah. And I
Yes.
use it, by the way, also not just for myself, but I use it, with my husband. We've been married like 29 years, end of this year. And a couple of years ago, we went on a couples retreat, but I told it wasn't a romantic retreat. It was a strategic retreat, right? To plan the next, like year. And
Wow.
thrusted him with this Clifton Strength Finder and said, "Do this." I'm sure he wasn't that pleased, okay? But, after going through that, he was pretty skeptical at first, but I think it won him over, because it really articulated things that, he couldn't put his finger on. And we exchanged it so that he got to know me better and I got to know him better. You would think that after so many years of marriage, right, we should know each other, but that's not the case. And that really helps in terms of, understanding contextually as well, each other. And he used it for his workplace. So now, even with my key volunteers, and I get everyone to do the Strength Finder because we find it that's useful for a tool to see where the gaps are as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, particularly for ADHD-ers, right? As you know, we have an execution issue, right? We're just wired that way. Though there are some ADHD-ers who actually have very good execution skills, partly because maybe they worked on it over the years, right? Or they're hyperactive, so the energy helps. But where an ADHD, is in the position where they have very low execution strengths, then, maybe have a backup, if that's a key person, have a backup so that at least that part of the task get done, right? Or that person is very aware of oneself, they can at least work on that muscle there to try and up the execution strength. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're off to a great start, and it's always nice to see what people's strengths are so you can utilize that and bring that up. And as an ADHD yourself, you're rightly placed to bring up, the strengths of people who work with you, right? And also
Yeah.
to this topic, I know that many individuals with ADHD often have a very variable career, and like many of us feel that, okay, right, at some point it begins to diverge a bit too much. Like myself, I've been a scientist, a marketer, a communications professional, and a commercial model and an actor. And the list goes on. I won't go on here because we will be here all day. But what is the challenge is to bring that all together. How do people with ADHD find out what their unique advantage is, right, in order to channel that strength into an environment that suits our neurodifference? And so I developed the Communicating Your Value program, where I take ADHD through a framework. And then in the end, I use my marketing communications hat, to help them communicate their value. And I think this is perhaps something, that could be quite valuable for people with ADHD. And
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have a pretty checkered education history and career too, like yourself. And I did my undergraduate in journalism, and then I did law school, and I did my MBA, and then I did a master's in e-business law, right? So I remember people asking me, like, what the heck, how do all these relate, you know? And to most people, these are all very siloed kind of professions or education. But I managed to put it all together very well because a couple of years ago, when I moved to Singapore, I actually began to work in healthcare, so another industry, right? But because there was more autonomy this time, I could actually combine all the different things that I had learned before, whether it's in terms of education or just work experience. And then, that combo was a pretty powerful one because, I mean, how many people have a combination of different fields and experiences and skills? I have a friend who is in the technology field, and the interesting thing about him is that he transformed his company, right, in the last couple of years. You know why? He specifically said he's hiring polymaths, which is like multi potentialites, multi hyphenates, whatever you want to call it, right? He's specifically hiring polymath people. So I think that actually this is one area where ADHDs can actually shine, really, really shine, because we have such varied interests. We're such curious people, right? That we have really combined a lot of skill sets, a lot of knowledge, and with the world becoming so uncertain, right? They call it the VUCA world, right? So much uncertainty, right? Being able to see patterns and link across things that are not obviously related is actually a fantastic strength. And I think that there's not enough conversations in the workplace right now about people who are with neurodivergent thinking.
Mhm.
that can actually transcend, and add value in these areas. So I think there needs to be more conversations on that.
Yeah, and I think post-pandemic, there's been more awareness around neurodiversity. So neurodiversity just means that we all have different brains and we all have different qualities. And yeah, more people are realizing now that the strengths of people with neurodivergent brains, ADHD-ers, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxic, and yeah, so all these people have the ability to think outside the box, and creative thinking, and there's this above average human capital. It's how do we
Absolutely.
tap into that, right?
Yeah,
And
yesterday I attended this ADHD Ireland conference.
Mhm.
Okay, and Dr. Edward Hallowell was a guest. And one of the interesting things he said, he was talking about COVID. And there was a guy that was like the inventor of the PCR test.
Yeah,
I think he passed away in 2019. But this guy was ADHD,
right, interesting.
talking about changing the world, right?
Yeah,
He talked about Richard Branson,
yeah.
right? And then we know people in athletics, right? Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, right? Lots of celebrities, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, whatever. And you know what? We're on LinkedIn Live. All these folks on LinkedIn, so I think you can actually change perception and stigma, right? If you have ADHD and you're a professional, talk about it. Change the way people perceive ADHD, as because a lot of people perceive ADHD as, like people who just can't hold on a job, they can't do well in school, In fact, one of my volunteers was told, when she went for to see a psychiatrist thinking that she had ADHD, when the psychiatrist heard which school she went to, which is one of the top schools, he said, nah, you can't have ADHD, you're just stressed, right? So we really need to counter all these things because you know what? Achievers do have ADHD as well.
Mm, that's right.
Yeah, because once we understand and we accept that people, that are so-called, intelligent, right, or professionals can have ADHD, then actually the boundaries and the stigma should be gone, right? It's just like any other thing. Anyone can have diabetes, right? Anyone can be short-sighted, right?
Mhm. That's right. I think when we last spoke, we talked about the twice exceptional,
Yeah,
um, yeah, no notion, in the sense that you are exceptionally exceptional, but also you have some disability that is
right.
hindering you from achieving that potential. And yeah, so the well-being and the support of an ADHD, is so important in order to help them harness the strength and maximize their potential, right? So that they can go on and do great things. And like you say, actually, it's a lot of the examples that you give of the successful people with ADHD, they have had the autonomy and the room to maneuver, to like, apply their creativity, into something that eventually changed the world, right? And so this is just an example of some of the things that we're really great at. So I think you really kind of answer my last question, which is the values that an ADHD-er can bring to an organization, which is the human capital of someone with ADHD.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. you know
absolutely.
but the other thing I wanted to say as well, I mean, I don't know whether anyone without ADHD is, tuning in now, or maybe people who suspect that they have but haven't been formally diagnosed. And one of the questions that people have is, should I or should I not go for a diagnosis, right? My life seems sort of okay, there are little bits and pieces here that could be better, but I'm okay, right? Then you know what? Again, I'm quoting Dr. Hallowell because I just love him so much, right? But he said last night, one of the issues actually, and that from that conference yesterday, that people said that needs to change in the thinking is that we keep on thinking about ADHD in terms of impairment.
Mm,
And if someone doesn't strictly meet that impairment kind of a label, right, then we think maybe we shouldn't go there. Maybe we shouldn't go for a diagnosis because we're not impaired.
yeah.
you know just like a lot of people look at me and say, no, you can't have ADHD, you're too organized. Actually, they don't know me at home, right? It's just the external me. But so a lot of people, they don't come forward to get the assessment because they think, I'm not that bad, I'm not really that impaired, right? But what Hallowell was saying is that one of the big issues actually is underachievement.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know it doesn't sound so important. It sounds like a first world problem rather than a third world problem. But actually, if you think about it, underachievement, right, especially when one is older, 40s, 50s, or whatever, you know there's always this nagging feeling that you have some kind of a capability, but how come it's not there, right? You know, and why are like all your classmates doing much better when you think you could do just as well, but how come you're not there? And that really eats at a person. It may not, it's a very silent kind of thing, it's a very chronic thing.
Yeah.
But why not do something about it? Because if it really is ADHD, right, then you know what, whole new chapter of life begins after that. As
That's right.
we mentioned earlier, right, people are living decades longer now.
Mm-hmm.
There's still the rest of your life. Like in Singapore, there
Mm-hmm.
was one of my community members, right? He's actually a British guy, in his 50s. We had a chat, and he was saying that, he just was diagnosed. But, can you imagine, not just him, but even for myself and for other friends of mine in the 40s and 50s, when you find out so late, then you think, what if, right? What could have life been like, right? So the question is, why wait? Find out. If you don't have it, great, go on with life, right? If you have it, great, now you've got no excuse. Okay, go and empower yourself and do something about it.
Yeah.
So we want to also like have that message out there to people too, right? Is to, what are you waiting for? Go and get checked. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I want to add that for girls and women, if when we enter a certain life transition, our hormonal changes also play a role. So if you feel like you're doing okay right now, but there's going to be a transition where, say, you hit motherhood or after birth or perimenopause or menopause, where the impact of hormonal changes can impact ADHD traits, and things can seem a lot harder at the time. And I know a lot of women with ADHD and menopause who end up quitting their jobs, in their 50s, because they don't feel like they're going to get the understanding, and also they feel like they are struggling. So back to the point of what Dr. Hallowell said about self-doubt, I actually spoke to him about that, and I think that is rooted in the neurological, processes in the ADHD brain, where the default mode network, the mind-wandering
Mm.
element of the brain, is switched on at the same time as the task-positive network. So, we are trying to do the work, and also we are still wondering whether we are okay to do it, right? And that is occurring all the time in the background of our brain, so that is very noisy. And and it can interfere in us trying to actually go ahead and do the thing that we set out to do. So
Yep,
the thing you said about
absolutely.
execution, about execution, and that's why a lot of ADHDers can procrastinate on something, especially if it's something that requires them to put themselves out there,
Mhm.
and yeah, so there is the fear of getting shamed and everything. So yeah, so if we can silence that bit, with help and with our management strategies, that will allow us to live a more fulfilling life, won't it? And actually realize our potential.
Absolutely. And also the other thing is about, you're talking about women, right? And again, we have hormonal issues, right? I mean, through the life cycle, whether that's puberty, there's pregnancy, there's menopause. And actually, because of all that and up and down in the hormones, the way that, the medication, reacts in our bloodstream actually is different. I didn't know that until recently. And then in terms of even the symptoms, right? I read an article saying that, when we are near menopausal, it actually, the symptoms get more pronounced. So now there's also some research to see whether, hormone therapy or something might help. So it's still very new in research, just like, ADHD in women is something relatively new because women were always overlooked in the past. So, just keep your eyes on the, I think US actually has been quite the forefront in this area.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are quite a lot of researchers who are doing work in this field, in the field of hormones and ADHD. And recently, I spoke to Professor Sandra Kush, who does that work. She leads the work in Europe, in the
Mhm.
Netherlands, in The Hague, and she is actually finding it difficult to find the funding for like a really impactful research, that she wants to create, to see the effects of hormones on the psychological and the physical impact on women with ADHD. So it's an important area of research and a new one, and we definitely need to know more about it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I
That's,
think the other challenge, particularly when you're a woman with ADHD, is, first of all, the caregiving still tends to fall on the women.
mhm.
And so if you're an ADHD-er and then you're trying to manage a kid who most likely has ADHD, you are trying to juggle two people's execution kind of daily stuff at the same time, right? And I was just speaking with a couple of friends a few days ago, and they were asking about do's and don'ts of women with ADHD. And one of them was, don't expect that we fit the stereotype of most women, that we are very neat and tidy at home, and we'll be like immaculate housekeepers. Yes, some are fantastic, but not everyone is. But that's the stereotype. And so because of the expectation, actually, then it gets even more overwhelming for women, So I thought that was a good one to bring up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, a lot of women also get help. You get a housekeeper, a cleaner to come in, so you don't even really notice you're in this organization because you outsource it, right? And there's more and more people who do that now. But at some point, a penny is going to drop, if your cleaner calls in sick for a whole week, and then what happens, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this wonderful chat today. We've had some really good comments, that came up. People were saying that, this interview has really given them hope for their son, and that every word has resonated, with them, and they realize that, the impact ADHD can have on the school system and the exam system, especially in Asia as well, where it's very, maybe also in the UK, where it's very concentrated in achieving the grades. So thank you for this insight. And any last words about what you hope to achieve for the future, or any sort of parting comments?
I think we just want to make sure that the community remembers that there's hope, and because there's hope, right, then please empower yourself to make that difference in your life and in the lives of other people around you.
That's amazing, Moonlake. And also I will showcase, I will signpost people to the video, that amazing launch video that your organization has had. And it's such a great video with 3 case studies talking about the journey of a woman with ADHD, and one who has a son with ADHD, and actually a girl with ADHD. So that's really interesting watch. Thank you for the time today. And
thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for tuning in from wherever you are in the world. We will be sharing a recording of this session on ADHD Girl's YouTube channel. I'll also post it on LinkedIn. And just on a side note, I've also teamed up with a few professional women who specializes in ADHD, and we are interested in partnering with corporates or academia who want to make the system more inclusive and more friendly to an ADHD-er. So please get in touch. And we are always also looking for sponsors for our LinkedIn Live. So if you are in the business of empowering individuals with ADHD, come and chat with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.